This meeting is being held remotely at alternate means of public access pursuant to the order issued by the Governor of Massachusetts dated March 12, 2020, suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law. You are hereby advised that the meeting and all communications during the meeting may be recorded by the town of Scituate in accordance with the open meeting law. Meetings Meetings will have a question and answer session following each public hearing. Abutters will have the ability to raise a hand. Please keep the total to less than 3 minutes for discussion. Roll call, commissioners. So I want to start with a roll call of all the members. And if you could just answer yes when I call your name. So Rich?
Here.
Okay, you're going to have to unmute and unmute Rich.
Yep, I understand.
Okay, so mute now. Thank you. Penny?
Yes, here.
Jen?
Yes, here.
Doug?
Yes, here.
Andy?
Yes.
Brendan?
Yes.
Thank you. So the agenda, I'd like to get an acceptance of the agenda. Does anybody have anything they want to add or omit from the agenda?
No, I make a motion, we accept the agenda as written.
I have a second on that.
Second?
That was Doug. Correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay. So Rich?
Yes.
Penny?
Yes,
Jen?
Yes.
Doug?
Yes.
Andy?
Yes.
Brendan?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, so do we want to do Lighthouse Road first? Is Sean?
Yep, it's on A. Yes, comes
Okay.
right up.
So on March 16, 2020, 6:30 p.m., the Town Hall, the Scituate Conservation Commission will hold a wetlands hearing under Chapter 131, Section 40, the Massachusetts General Laws, and Section 30700, Town of Scituate Code of Bylaws, regarding the application of the Town of Scituate to remove and replace existing Cedar Point gravity sewer at location Rebecca Road, Lighthouse Road, and Turner Road, Scituate. Abutters and other interested parties are invited to attend. So I believe the presenter for that is
Presenter Ziad from Environmental Partners.
Syed Carey. So is he on?
He was in the waiting room.
I think he's waving to be unmuted.
Yeah, he needs to be unmuted.
I'll leave it to one of you guys.
I keep trying to do it. I think he should be good.
Yeah.
No,
Can you hear
here he
me?
is. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, Ziad Carey with Environmental Partners Group.
Good evening.
I believe Sean was gonna do an open, Sean McCarthy. I'm not sure if he's on board.
I am.
Okay.
I think we went right by that, Mr. Chairman and members of the board, but I'll let Ziad take it away. He's a principal with Environmental Partners, our design and permitting consultant for this project, and he can give you some of the highlights of the project. And I'll stay on the line in case there's any questions.
Thank you, Sean.
Thank you, Sean. Well, good evening, everyone. So I actually am part of the design team and the project manager on this project. Basically, what this is all about, it's about 4,140 linear feet of gravity sewer. On Lighthouse Road, there's 2,023 feet, 8-inch and 10-inch combination. On Rebecca Road, there's about 1,871. On Turner Road was 245 linear feet. This was all constructed in the 1970s, and it's a major source of infiltration and inflow. And basically was made of vertified clay pipe. So you could see the cracks in the pipeline and the joint. You could imagine that would bring in a bunch of water into the sewer for treatment. So the depth of the sewer basically ranges from about 6 feet below grade to about 18 feet below grade. What we're proposing here is PVC SDR 35 pipe with the joint wraps, and the manholes will be fiberglass manholes. Basically, will be watertight. There are about 129 sewer services on this for the residents. A lot of them are deep sewer, chimneys and services, and those will be wrapped as well, so just to avoid any infiltration of water into the line. There will be a bypass, so the line itself would be replaced in the same alignment, same location. The contractor will tackle one segment at a time, basically going manhole to manhole, and the bypass would consist of a temporary sewer line, which basically would collect the sewer flows from this particular segment, so nothing would be going into the trench and no resources will be impacted. If there is a need for pumping for the gravity sewer to bypass the flow, would be monitored 24/7. Construction duration is 200 working days, which is about 40 weeks. And once this job is completed, the final restoration will consist of a full depth reclamation of the pavement. The whole pavement will be done. The sewer services would be replaced right up to the properties. And this is basically the scope of the work. In terms of the erosion control, so erosion controls are spread out for along the whole alignment, except for obviously driveways and public access. The catch basins will have the silt sacks in them, and those will be maintained on a regular basis. Stockpiles would be stored away about 100 feet from the buffer, and it would have a ring of hay bales and a secondary containment, so nothing would leave the site. In terms of the dewatering, as you know, this is tidally influenced, so the alignment basically sits in groundwater, and every time the tide comes up, the groundwater will be influenced as such. So therefore, there will be some pumping of groundwater to be able to install the sewer in the dry. And the pumping, we're envisioning a frac tank and secondary containments just to prevent any siltation from migrating outside the works. Public notification, we notified the public. I got the green cards up here. They're all been notified. And we talked about construction duration for 200 working days. We just bid the contract, and the anticipated start of construction would be late August, early September. When this is all done, obviously loam and seed of all disturbed area will be completed. We talked about the dewatering system. If you would go to the next slide, please. This is basically the whole alignment. The deepest part is on Jericho Road. It's about 18 feet deep to make the connection. To study this project, we put monitoring wells, and those we put piezometers in there to just monitor the groundwater and the tidal influence on groundwater. So we have enough information on there for somebody to go in and do the job clean. Turner Road is just a small little piece. It's about 10 feet deep. And then the end of Lighthouse, at the end of Lighthouse, that the sewer is fairly shallow. It's about 6 feet deep. And then, of course, the deepest part would be on Jericho. I think that's all I have. If you have any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer.
Sean, do you want to add anything to this? Sean McCarthy?
No, other than the project going from a pressurized sewer that was presented to the board back in April of 2018 with a previous order of conditions issued. The gravity system proposed will be located in the street where the existing system is, and the connections will be made to each home as close to the foundation as possible to try to remove that vitrified clay out of the system, as I had mentioned. I think that's it at the moment.
Okay, thank you, Sean. Inside. So why don't we just go right to the members first? Might be out of order a little bit, but Rich, why don't you?
Yeah, just really one question. Are all the old pipes taken away, actually taken out and moved?
Yes, again, we tackle segment by segment, and the pipe would be removed between two manholes, and a new pipe would be installed and would be hauled off-site, taken away. The contractor will own it.
That's all for now.
Penny?
I just have a curiosity question. Out at Lighthouse Point, you have two ends. Is there a reason why you just didn't loop the whole thing around there? I know there's no house, it's a parking lot, but it just...
This would add more pipe to the project, and there's nothing off the parking lot to be serviced, so it kind of made sense to
just
go
have two ends.
two separate flows. That's correct.
Okay. No, I'm fine with it.
Okay. Jen?
No question.
Doug?
Just a couple. Are these all services, all the individual services replacements, or are you sewering any existing houses that are currently on septic? Are there any septic out there at all?
I think we have, Doug, we have 129 services. They're all already connected. I don't believe there are any houses that aren't connected to the system.
Okay. I would think that would be a good idea to connect them if at this opportunity if we could. But if that's not necessary, that's great. And the timeline, would you say it was 250 days? Construction?
200 working days, about 40 weeks.
And you're going to start in, what would you say, August?
We obviously had anticipated an early start, but because of COVID-19 and the delays associated with that, we just bid the project, and we went to before the Board of Selectmen last week with a recommendation award. What the time frame on this obviously would be, the lead time would be on the fiberglass manholes, and those are fabricated out of state and they shipped. There could be 4 to 5 weeks of lead time on there, but we had envisioned that the actual construction, the contractor would mobilize around Labor Day. It could be either before Labor Day or a little bit after Labor Day.
Okay. Good. All right, thanks. Looks good.
I think you're on mute, Frank, but if you're asking me, I have no questions.
I think you're still on mute, Frank, but I have no additional questions either.
He's still mute.
How about now?
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. All right. Amy?
Sorry about that. Yeah, hi. So like Zayad and Sean pointed out, this is a big improvement project for the town, this portion of town. So there were orders that this is largely administratively just changing, the type of flows from pump to gravity. So I think we're ready to close.
Okay. Do we have anybody in the audience for this?
We raise hands.
Can anybody raise their hand if they have an interest or question?
Seeing none.
Okay. I've just got a few questions. So roughly how much I&I does this eliminate?
Hopefully all of it. Basically what we're doing, we're wrapping the joints and we're really making it watertight. We've designed fiberglass manholes in Weymouth back in 2013, right on the intercoastal, and the frames are watertight. The manhole comes in one piece. The only thing that we would put would be a concrete block at the bottom to prevent flotation because of the groundwater may uplift the structure. Other than that, it's just a bulletproof type of, waterproof structure, if you will. And then the pipe itself, it's a PVC with, wrapped joints. So we expecting zero, infiltration into the line.
Okay. But we know that there's quite a bit now. Do you have like a rough idea of what this will?
Let me see if I could find that information here because I know it was on file. I don't really recall exactly how much they've been using, but
Maybe Sean, do you have any recollection of that?
I was going to add, I believe it was around 40,000 gallons per day, and that would be a bare minimum number. Those numbers increase when we receive storm events, and not only do we have groundwater leaking in from below the surface, but from infiltration points higher up when the storm surge comes over the walls.
Got it.
Those numbers,
So it's pretty significant.
It is. It was identified as the number one, or having the highest infiltration and inflow rates for the study that was done in 2016 by CDM.
Okay. In terms of temporary piping, as you dig through this, so is this actually going to be pumped on the lines on the surface, or I'm not quite sure how they do the temporary part.
Yeah, so if you envision a stretch of a pipe, which is, let's say, 200 feet between manholes, this line would be, we will put in a temporary line in front of those houses, and we'll connect those houses to the temporary line. And that line would flow by gravity downstream from where the work is happening.
Got it.
And then now you go in there to dig down, you remove the old pipe, and then you put the new pipe in. You test it, and then you put it back online, and then you move on to the next segment. So
Okay.
if you can't do it by gravity, like depending on the depth and on the each segment is a little bit different. If you cannot do it by gravity, you'd have to block off the manhole upstream and pump from upstream to the manhole downstream, and then go in there and then replace the pipe.
Okay, thank you. And I think asking about sounds like Doug's question with a concern about the start time. Obviously, you're going to get into winter, so you've got provisions to button things up, tighten up. That's very exposed during storms. I know there's only so much you can do with that, but certainly it's part of the contract with the who's ever going to pull this all together, some provisions to make sure that things could be secured for storms and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think also, depending on the contractor's workforce, there's a chance you could expedite the work and then have a couple crews on there. That's a possibility too, to kind of cut back on the 40 weeks or 200 days. It is a possibility. Okay. I think the work has to be completed in 40 weeks, but then again, you could basically postpone the paving until you've gone through a freeze-thaw cycle to be able to let the whole thing settle and then come back and then do it in the spring, perhaps.
Sure. You mentioned the storage and containment. Do you know where the storage areas are?
We haven't worked out those details. We had preliminary discussions with Kevin and Sean, perhaps using town lots a little bit outside the zone there. But some of that stuff, the contractor would have to work the details with either private property owners or maybe with the town.
Because we have had some issues with that before. We want to be sure that we're in the loop on where those locations are. There's not too many areas in that vicinity that don't have some jurisdiction with the commission. So we just want to be sure we're in the loop with that and make sure that those areas are properly contained.
Sure.
And then oversight, maybe Sean can elaborate a little bit. Who's the lead on that, and how does that work?
Actually,
Yeah.
Environmental Partners will have a resident engineer on site daily, overseeing the work, communicating with residents, and they will be, providing weekly updates to Kevin and myself and the DPW, so that we can then pass along updates to the selectmen and to the town administrator as well, that maybe can pass on information to the public, keeping them informed as the project goes on. But Environmental Partners will be overseeing it on a daily basis.
Okay, thank you, Sean. I don't have any further questions. If everyone else is all set, I'd take a motion.
I make a motion to close.
Okay, that was Penny. Second?
A second.
That was Jen. All in favor? So, Rich,
Aye, yes.
Penny,
Yes.
Jen,
Yes.
Doug. He's waving. Okay.
Unmute. There we
Yeah,
are. Yes.
Andy,
Yes.
Brendan,
Yes.
and Frank Snow, yes. Thank you. Thank you very much. 166
Thank you.
Jericho. Thank you.
Actually,
Thank you.
can we, for this one, can we make a motion to issue the orders as well?
I make a motion
Sure.
for the orders to be issued.
Do I have a second?
A second.
All in favor? So, Rich,
In favor, yes.
Penny,
Yes.
Jen,
Yes.
Doug,
Yes.
Andy,
Yes.
Brendan,
Yes.
Frank Snow, yes. How's that? Great. Well, that's a long overdue and awaited project that will benefit the town.
Thundering out.
166 Jericho. So this is continued from April 6th. And do we have Greg
Correct.
Morse?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, Greg, good evening.
Good evening.
Where do we want to pick up on that?
He had to get us some information. You requested a bunch of stuff, Frank.
The plan on the screen is 168 or 166 Jericho. This is 148 Jericho, I believe, that we're talking about.
No, we're doing 166.
We're doing 160. I apologize. Yep. Okay.
So on this one, do we have a foundation plan?
Yes. We
Yes.
submitted a foundation plan, and we submitted a revised site plan, which is what you have. We submitted that back on March 13th. The revisions that we made, we included a cross-section on the site plan to specifically identify the limits of the Toppa Coastal Bank in accordance with the DEP policy. And then we put some additional notes. We had originally proposed to remove a piece of the foundation that was on the harbor side of the house. We've since decided to, raise or take down the house at that location, but to leave the foundation in place on the harbor side. So the concrete foundation would stay. The new foundation for the new house, we did provide the structural plans for that. It is FEMA compliant. This is in an AE zone. It's equipped with the flood vents as necessary.
Well, it's in a velocity and AE zone, right?
So all of the proposed house is located in the AE zone. A piece of the site is in the velocity zone, but the house is entirely in the AE.
Yeah, and I mean, I think from my perspective on this, I mean, we did just get new information on it for the stamp plans just earlier today. But that being said, I think it's probably in everyone's interest to close this one, depending on what questions that you have. Frank, one of the things that you had was the void between the wall, where the mud flats are in the house. There was a question about whether that was going to be backfilled or just what was going to happen there. And then there was also the coastal bank delineation, which is on the newest version of the plan. So that is submitted.
So is there any addition on the plan, Greg, for that? Anything against the harbor? I'm not quite sure what's there now, stone.
So no, we wouldn't be adding anything at the back of the property. We'd leave the foundation in place, which is filled up to grade on the inside right now with crushed stone. So that would remain at the back of the house. We had originally proposed to excavate and remove the foundation, and there was a question about what we would be bringing in for fill. But we've since removed that part of the proposal. We would leave that portion of the foundation.
Okay. And then what was the depth of the foundation, the footings? So
it's a standard 4-foot depth for the foundation. The inside of the foundation is a slab. The slab is flush with the ground surface on the outside of the house, but it does go down 4 feet.
Is that the bottom of the footing or the bottom of the foundation?
Bottom of the footing. It's 4 feet.
Can you pull them up? I don't know if I have it here. Well, why don't we start to go through? Rich, do you have any other questions on this?
No, not at the moment.
Penny?
Yeah, the only question I have is, you kind of answered it already, Greg, but I'm a little confused still. At the back of the house on the ocean side, okay, you have those huge, but you have the foundation that the deck or whatever you want to call it sits on. And then you have these big boulders. And some of the boulders look like they have been displaced over time with storms. Are you going to put them back up against the foundation or just leave how Mother Nature has distributed it?
So
I'm looking at this picture of the back of the house.
Okay. I mean, if there's a storm that's obviously been displaced by a storm,
Yeah, stones.
I would think that we could, talk with the agent maybe at the pre-construction about relocating 1 or 2 of those stones. But it wasn't our intention to go in and change the stones along the harbor or alter that revetment in any way. But if there's 1 or 2 that are displaced, I'm sure we'd be, looking to replace those or move them.
Well, if you look at the picture, there looks like there's some concrete slabs mixed in and with the stones.
There has been over time. There are pieces of concrete that are mixed in there.
All right. I just want to kind of be sure that whatever's there is somewhat stabilized, to stay in place.
Yeah, that's why we decided not to excavate out the old foundation.
Right. Okay.
Leave the old foundation in place.
Okay. Yep. Thank you.
Jen?
No, I think I'm good. Thanks for asking those questions, Penny. That was helpful.
Okay. You're welcome.
Doug?
No, I don't think I have a question really. Just an observation. If the existing foundation has been filled with crushed stone and you're going to drive piles, is that going to be problematic?
It's not a pile foundation, Doug. This is poured concrete.
This is poured. Okay, I thought I saw.
On the back of the house, there is a deck which just has standard pilings to support the deck on the back of the house.
Okay.
But but the foundation for the primary structure is poured concrete.
Okay, okay. I was conflating those two things, so I get it. That answers my question.
Andy?
I'm okay for now.
Okay. Brendan?
No questions at this time.
Do we have anybody else in the audience for questions or comments on this?
They should raise their hands.
If they could raise their hand.
Yeah.
So, Greg, as I told you before, I've been concerned about this area being scoured and washed out, this type of foundation. And we've seen that happen in 78 and 91 where the water overtops the seawall along Turner Road and Oceanside, and all that water runs down and ultimately runs out into the harbor over Jericho around these houses. And it's happened before. Some of these before didn't have footings and maybe they weren't quite as deep. But I'm wondering about the possibility of having a deeper foundation. I don't know, is there any way to calculate that or scour? The problem is you're pinched in between other houses, so when that water runs through there, it really digs out these areas. And it's just a question. I know you're 4 feet down for frost, but I don't think frost is going to be your biggest issue in that location. And is there any way to protect against that, or any other thoughts?
No, I mean, 4 feet was the standard. This house here was built in 72. In all the houses around it, I mean, they were all poured concrete foundations as well, with the exception of a small cottage immediately to the right, which is elevated primarily for a view, not because of any FEMA requirements.
Right.
To do it an extra depth on the footing, I'm sure that's doable. If that was, there's not really a way to calculate scour in a case like this to determine what an acceptable depth would be. If the commission wants to make a recommendation in the order of conditions, or I can certainly pass one on, but there is no regulatory requirement for that. I do hear the concern, though.
I hate to leave this thing loose, but I'm wondering if there's some way if we can put that into the orders when the house is demolished and you're excavating. There's no borings or any soil analysis on these plans, so we really don't know what's there. I also don't know where you'll hit water. But it would seem to me like it would benefit the owners and potentially alleviate a problem to do anything they could to protect that. Any suggestions, Amy, on how that could be added or into our order?
Well, on this one, Greg, I think that this is the site where we do not have the stamp plans. Is that correct?
Yeah, you don't have a structural engineered stamp plan at this point. You have the architect's foundation.
So
Right.
Will we be getting a structural engineer?
There will be for the building permit, yes.
Yes, so we could have a special condition that requires sign off on the structural plans before building permit issues.
That makes sense, but I think they should note that the commission may look at that when we actually have a structurally approved plan and see whether we feel that that's adequate. I wouldn't mind having that discussion with the building inspector as well.
Yeah, well, so we'll word it so that it's very clear that sign off is needed, potentially even a meeting with the agent and or commissioners before they move ahead.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So I
Just,
Go ahead.
well, just one quick observation is just because of just the previous application we just closed on. Just a note of this is going to be sewered, correct?
I think these are all on sewer now, Doug.
Yeah. So that depth, I'm just talking about the depth of the foundation and all the construction on here. I was just looking at the drainage trench out front and stuff is just making the allotment, for any work that's being done in this area, understanding that that's going to be happening this fall. That's all.
Do you know the timing of this, Greg?
Unfortunately, my client on this case has passed away. I expect that the permits will be obtained and it will be sold at this point. So I don't think it's any time in the near future.
Okay.
I'm sorry to hear that. Amy, can there be I think to Doug's point, we'd also want to just review this. Obviously, under digging this out and doing this during a time period where there's vulnerability to storms or washout, that the commission have the opportunity to review all this. You're going to have a pre-construction anyways.
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, are you thinking time of year restriction for foundation or something like that?
I just think having a discussion with the contractor and who's ever involved in coordinating this so that they understand their liability or what it could do to not only this house, but the abutters.
Yeah.
Okay. We can work that into the orders. All right. So can we do this jointly, like a motion to close and issue orders? Can we do that in one vote?
Yes.
Okay. I'll take a motion. Anybody want to make a motion to close and issue orders?
I make a motion that we close and issue orders for 166 Jericho Road.
Do I have a second? That was Jen for the motion and Penny for the second? Richard. I got to get that new garbled sound down. All right, so we have a motion and a second. So, Rich?
Yes.
Penny? Penny?
Yes, I said.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
A couple of times. Jen?
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Doug?
Yes.
Andy?
Yes.
Brendan?
Yes.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Greg.
Thank you.
148 Jericho Road. This is also continued. And also Mr. Morse. Fire away.
Great. For the record, Gregory Morse, registered engineer. The applicant, I believe, is on the line with us too, Jane and Patrina Analetto. This is a notice of intent for a new single-family home at 148 Jericho Road. This was presented to the commission, I believe it was late February or early March. We went over the site. The proposal here was to take down the existing house and to construct a new one in its place. The new one is set back approximately 10 feet further from Scituate Harbor, and it is elevated in elevation up on a FEMA-compliant foundation. It's located in a zone AE. What we were requested to do at the last meeting, and we submitted revised plans on March 13th, that's the plan that's on the screen now, is we included a cross-section on the left-hand side of the page to identify where the top of the coastal bank is measured from. In this case here, it's a very clear delineation at the back of the site. And then secondarily, we provided the Conservation Commission with a set of structural engineer stamped foundation plans. Again, the foundation here, it's a poured concrete foundation. It would have a minimum of a 4-foot wall all the way around. The interior slab would be flush with the ground surface on the outside, and it is equipped with FEMA flood vents. The FEMA elevation here is at elevation 15. All of our habitable space is 2 feet above that at elevation 17. Turn it over to you.
Okay.
Ooh,
Rich?
No questions for the moment.
Penny?
no, I think the only question we had last time out was on the coastal bank delineation. I'm all set, thank you.
Thank you. Jen?
Yeah, I'm all set.
Doug?
No questions.
Andy?
All set.
Brendan?
All set.
Amy?
Excellent.
All set.
Okay. Anybody from the audience? Anybody want to put their hand up? No? So I guess my concerns are sort of the same as with the last house. Looking at, I know we have structural plans on this one, but the concerns of timing, erosion if there's a storm, and then the depth of the foundation. I don't think this house is quite as exposed, but still certainly could get a lot of scour around it.
It is. It's right there.
Yeah, so timing on this one, they expect to be well under construction in August, hopefully with a foundation. And the building, I believe, is scheduled to come in August. It comes manufactured. All other approvals are in place at this point. So it would be August into September for any of the earthwork and foundation work.
And I would say that it's not necessarily likely that approvals will be in place by early August. So that applicants should definitely keep that in mind, especially with the appeal window being 55 days from the state.
Really?
Okay, can we add in, if we're going to close and issue orders for this one as well, I'd like to do the same thing as have discussion with the building inspector to just review that maybe at the time that the building's demolished or something, just take a look at that location.
Sounds good, Frank.
Right. So I'd take a motion to close and issue orders.
I make a motion to close and issue orders on 148 Jericho.
Okay, do I have a second? That was Doug. Thank you. So Rich?
Yes.
Penny?
Yes.
Jen?
Yes.
Doug?
Yes.
Andy?
Yes.
And Brendan?
Yes.
Frank, yes. Thank you, Greg.
Thank you.
One more.
So 66 Jericho Road. On March 16th, 2020 p.m., the 6-5 meeting at Town Hall, Scituate Conservation Commission will hold a wetlands hearing. It should be the 5:15 meeting. Town Hall, Scituate Code of Bylaws regarding the application of the Scituate Boat Club to install 10 pilings and relocate existing dock floats. Location is 66 Jericho Road, Scituate. Abutters and other interested parties are invited to attend. So this should be Greg again.
Yes. Again, for the record, Gregory Morse, registered engineer representing the Scituate Boat Club at 66 Jericho Road. The Scituate Boat Club currently has a dock layout which extends out into Scituate Harbor for access to its boats and dinghies. And that dock system is a free-floating dock system. It's anchored to moorings that are located on the bottom of the harbor. The boat club has applied for a Chapter 91 license. Believe it or not, they didn't have one for their dock system. They would apply on an annual basis with the harbor master for a Section 10A permit. But they've applied for an official Chapter 91 license with the DEP and the Army Corps. And as part of their project, they've also proposed to install 10 pilings. The pilings would anchor the dock system in place and prevent it from swinging. During specific wind periods or current periods, the dock will swing east to west by as much as 30 feet. It used to not be a problem when the yacht club, which is immediately to the east, was on a similar system, and it would float side to side as well. But the yacht club last year installed pilings and is now in a fixed location. So now the boat club is desiring to do the same thing. My preliminary correspondence with DEP, the Chapter 91 waterways, is that they're on board to issue their permits. The goal here would be to install the pilings this coming October. DEP posted no comments on their website. They issued a DEP file number. The dock system essentially stays the same as it always has been, with the exception that they've reconfigured a couple of the docks just to stay within their boundary lines. They encroached over the boundary lines by a couple of feet, as you can see on the plan.
Okay. So, Rich, any thoughts or questions?
I think it's a good idea not to have it floating around by 30 feet. So I have no questions, but it looks like an improvement.
Okay. Penny?
All set, thank you.
Jen?
Yeah, all set.
Doug? Doug?
Good,
Doug should be good.
good.
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. Andy?
All set.
Brendan?
I'm all set, Frank.
Amy?
I'm all set. It's a necessary component for the Chapter 91 license. So, largely this is administrative, and most of the oversight and review will happen with the state.
Okay. Anybody in the audience? Okay. Greg, do you know if these piles are going to be driven? Are they planning to do any jetting or all driven?
No, they'll all be driven piles.
Okay. Well, this will get a review from like fisheries and all that, or is it already
Yes,
already been
yes,
done?
it does.
Yes, we have comments from them.
Okay. And the number of piles, Greg, they feel are adequate to hold that in place?
They do. This here is a little bit different than a true marina because it doesn't have lots of boats that are moored up to it, on any regular basis. It's really temporary dockage. There wouldn't be boats there in a storm event or anything like that.
Okay. And the floats and everything, they still get removed in the winter, so just the piers stay?
Yes. Yep. The floats are all removed during the winter.
All right. That's it for me. So I could take a motion on this. Do we want to close this as a close-in issue as well? Okay. Anybody want to make
Yes.
that motion?
I make a motion that we close and issue the orders for the Scituate Boat Club.
Okay. Do I have a second?
Second.
That was Doug?
Yes.
Okay. So, Rich?
All set.
Penny? Penny can't be muted.
Yeah.
Okay. Jen,
Yep.
Doug,
Yes.
Andy,
Yes.
Brendan.
Yes.
Great. And Frank, yes. Okay,
Thank you very much.
good. Thank you, Greg. So what we have left for business is some discussion about the Museum Beach Nourishment Project. Amy, do you want to lead off on that? Or Penny? I don't know.
No, actually, we're going to turn it over to Jen Foley. We have
sorry.
a presentation on this that we put together, and I don't know. Well, actually, I'll start out just by saying that we've been talking about this for a number of years. Ever since I've been here, it's been a little bit of a topic that I inherited for sure. And Patrick, he said, someday you'll be dealing with this. And sure enough, every summer we seem to get, calls, and the boats seem to kind of stock up during the summer. There are people that are definitely in favor of seeing this area cleaned up. And the Conservation Commission tackled this last fall, seeing how the summer came and went last year, and there were still remained quite a few number of boats on the beach. I think that number was somewhere around 40 or so. This was way after boating season. So, after we talked about this in commission meetings at least a handful of times, and came up with a strategy to nourish the dunes there, to call out the needed protection of that sensitive resource area. And that would also require removal of the boats that are there. So Jen, maybe you want to add to that.
Yep. I'm just pulling up the deck to share. But yep, everything that Amy said is correct. Jen, is it okay if I share? I'm going to say yes.
It's okay if you share, yes.
Okay. So what we did last year was in January, we went through and counted and did kind of just a quick analysis of the boats and materials that were left behind. And there were about, I think, like 30 or 37. However, when we went and did a recent count, there were approximately 76 boats and probably about a dozen or so other items, just kind of like left behind paddles, life jackets, other things that are just, were just in the dunes. So what we've done is to just try and help convey where things are being left. The July analysis kind of calls these things into 6 different sections, as you can see highlighted there. The majority of the boats are kind of all in this first area, in area 2, as well as over in kind of 4, 5, and 6. This kind of like end over closer to the lighthouse. There's a couple images that we've included as well to show what's been left behind. And I would say, I would say probably 90% of what's there, if not 95, are all seemingly in working order. When we were there in January, I would have said, of the 35 or 40 boats that were there, maybe 10% or 15% looked, completely abandoned. But now these are, seemingly in active use. One thing that I definitely noticed was, and this isn't necessarily related to the dune, but none of them are very few of them are labeled. So even if we're kind of going on best practices for paddling safety, none of them have the Coast Guard labeling of, if this is floating, who they can contact to make sure there's no missing people. So there is actually theoretically a safety risk if some of these were to get swept out to the harbor. The Coast Guard could be looking for people that are safe in their homes and just left their kayaks behind. This was the summary that was from January, so 30 boats. So there's also one dock that's left behind, but you can kind of see how some of these just don't really look like they are, that people remember that they're there. And this walkway is still on the beach, probably in just about the same section as it was in January. Anything else
Thanks,
you
Jen.
want to get into, Amy?
Well, I mean, I guess that the reason why we're talking about it tonight is because there's been an increased interest and usage, clearly, of this area. I mean, there's lots of theories as to why that is, but, you know, the calls are coming in, parking complaints for just mostly, you know, I think people are concerned about the heavy use and the storage of this, you know, on the sensitive resource area, and would like the town to develop a strategy to address this property. So we have been placed on the agenda for the selectmen because clearly it's, you know, it's town property. You know, we don't want to necessarily enforce against the town. I think it's more that we're looking for partners and people to, you know, work with us to come up with a solution on getting the boats out of there, and then, you know, maybe a strategy for the future, whether it be, you know, just bring your kayak or stand-up paddleboard when you want to use it and then take it home with you, you know, rather than leave it on the dune. Or maybe, you know, there's a rack situation in the future. I'm not sure, but probably, I mean, like the other beaches in town, I think probably, you know, that would be the best for the resource area, you know, is to just have people take their devices with them home at the end of the day, rather than abandon or leave them there. But anyway, so we will be chatting with the selectmen about that, and trying to, you know, get this natural resource nourished and in good shape. It's such a lovely area. Any commissioners want to chime in and let us know your opinions? And then there are quite a few people still on the call, so I'm thinking that maybe these people, we can unmute them and see what they have to say. Does that sound like a good idea?
And maybe we'll just go through the commission members first, we normally do, and then we'll open it up to conversation. Rich?
Very short. The one thing I would say is I don't think anything should be left there in the winter. Somehow I think that needs to be cleaned out. You get a big storm, you're going to have stuff floating into the harbor that could damage other things. I think that's one thing that has to be cleaned up in the winter, and open to other people ideas for how it's handled in the summer so that it can be respectfully handled and still be a benefit for people who have those boats.
Okay, thank you. Penny?
Okay, first and foremost, I just wanted to interject one thing about the selectmen's meeting next week. From what I've been told by some select people, they're kind of hoping that we come in with a plan for them, not just to discuss it, kind of with a plan, so they can say yes or no or throw their ideas in. So that's number one. It has to definitely be cleaned up. It is a public beach. It is owned by the town. To be honest, I always thought it was private, so I didn't pay any attention to it all these years. And it came about, I think, when Pat was our agent, that I found out it's town-owned. They should be removed. If the selectmen want to let people have a rack down there and you go get a sticker like they do in P-Town. I sent that to Frank, Amy, and Jen today, that they have a sticker policy. You go get a sticker and you can leave it on the rack. Your sticker number is on the rack and so forth and so on during the boating season. But in the winter, you take them definitely home. But yeah, it definitely has to be cleaned up. And I don't think the rest of the commission, I don't know how you feel, but I don't have a problem with the town putting a rack in there, like I showed in the picture today, and to you have to get a sticker in order to leave your kayak there. But something has to be done.
Yeah, and Penny, so we have a plan, and the plan is a request for determination of applicability to nourish the dunes.
Yes.
And in order to execute the plan, we need to get the craft out of there. So, I mean, that's the clear plan. It's just how it's going to happen.
I didn't get that
down.
when you were speaking before. That's all. I just wanted to be sure that.
No, the plan is about the nourishment of the dunes, and so
Okay.
it's how do we address the fact that there's private property on this parcel and getting the word out there. To get
private property.
Get
Yeah.
them off. Yeah.
Okay. Well, would we do that through the newspaper and then have the town go pick them up or something?
Yeah, so we're going to put something in the paper, social media, signage, and also contact hopefully representatives of the yacht club and the beach association.
Okay.
And maybe we could do some mailings, but I think the word will get around pretty quickly. We just
It'll get
don't
around.
want it to create a frenzy.
Yeah. No. Okay. Thank you.
Add anything else to what you've already presented?
Me? No.
Jen?
Oh, sorry. No, not really. I normally don't disagree with Penny, but I wouldn't necessarily support putting racks in that area. I don't think we want to encourage anything getting left behind, and I wouldn't necessarily support somebody building that close to a dune. So I'd have to see a really good proposal to kind of get behind that.
Okay. Doug?
Not familiar with what other areas in Scituate do for kayakers. Is it normally just people come and go and there's a public launch area and then they pick up, or is there other areas where they leave the crafts overnight? And
No.
so this is
Not any legal areas, at least.
All right. So this is a particular area that there's a problem that's developed somewhat.
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, I agree. It obviously needs to be straightened out. I don't like the idea of the tide coming in and washing those out into the water for any reason, or a storm coming in or something like that. I hadn't thought about the Coast Guard part. Didn't realize that was it, but that would be a needless search exercise for them to undertake if they thought someone was out there. So yeah, I don't, and I'm not sure what the long-term solution be. It's kind of nice that people go out there and use it, and I think it'd probably be a lot of fun. I guess they just need to. I haven't seen a rack, so I'm not really familiar with. Obviously, you're talking to someone who doesn't do a lot of kayaking, so I don't know how the normal protocol is in the areas, but it seems like some sort of formal arrangement to have people bring their boats down there and then either leave them for the day or take them back at the end of the day, but they might need an access area to make that more apparent. I don't know if that could mean a specific area where there's a path or a dock or something like that they can walk down, but something to formalize it. So if they're going to use it, that they use it within the guidelines that the town would prefer, and not damage the beach and leave stuff behind. Some of that just looks like rubbish at this point. So, but I guess I'm going to yield to some of your others' expertise of what you do with these. They're not that heavy. I just assume that people would take them home every night anyways, because they could be run off with. But apparently they don't. So.
Okay. Andy?
Yeah, I mean, I think we have to get that many kayaks out of there. That's a lot. My guess is there are people who've been doing this for a long time and they'll be disappointed. But like a lot of things, it probably started with a handful and it was harmless, and it grew to 75, and that's too much. So, I'd love to see it remain obviously accessible and open for anyone to use. I think it's a great spot to paddle. I'd consider a rack system, particularly if there is some, if you have to pay for the convenience. Anyone can use it, it's open, but to pay for the convenience of the rack, there's some fee, and potentially because we know it's a well-used area and we want to be restoring that dune over time, maybe that the fee can then go back to nourishment of the area, so that people who pay for the convenience can help to support upkeep of the dune over time. So I'd be open to that for sure, but I think 75 is a lot of kayaks for a beach to be sitting out in the open.
Got it. Brendan?
Yeah, I think I agree with everyone else. I think that there's just too many kayaks out there. At this point, it's, like Andy said, I think it started and now it's ballooned. So they definitely, something needs to be done. They have to go. I could be open to the possibility of a rack type situation. I don't know, I guess I would have to, see what the presentation was, and if that might, I don't know, this is one spot where there's a rack. Are we going to start having racks everywhere? That's another question. If that would then proliferate, I don't know if that would even happen. But for the, overall, I think people should be taking their kayaks home. It's not that much of a inconvenience. I do it, and I have a really heavy kayak. So that's really my thoughts on it.
Okay. Do we have anybody in the audience that would want to speak to this? Can you meter that out like one at a time?
Yeah, I'll just start calling on people and say, because we have that raise hand. Do you have somebody that raised their hand? Yes. Oh, yeah.
Yes.
So I'd ask whoever it is to just state their name and address.
Oh, hi, this is Katrina Analito. I just live there and on that beach. And I was just going to say, if people do want to bring their kayak, and I think the problem is that they can't drive and park anywhere adjacent to that beach, but I think you can park at the lighthouse and then launch from that little beach, which should sort of offset that problem, just in my opinion. Can you park at the lighthouse beach and launch from there?
I don't know that there's any parking at the the lighthouse beach, sure. So.
Which is a pretty simple kayak across the bay. That's all. It's kind of like a remediation suggestion.
Good point, Katrina. Thank you.
Is there someone else?
Well, I don't see anybody raising their hands, so.
Okay, can I?
We could do the phone, yeah. Here, I'll just unmute the phone and just ask. Hi, this is Amy from Conservation. Do you have any comments?
Hi, Amy, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Mike Seeley. I was going to say a similar comment. I don't necessarily disagree with what everybody's saying, but I think for most people, and I don't have a kayak or anything over there, but for most people, because there's no parking, what you end up getting is a lot of live parking on Jericho Road or a lot of illegal parking on the side streets. So I would just just think of the fallout of that. It can be dangerous when you have live cars parking on Jericho. It's a pretty busy road. You have a lot of people trying to cross the street. So, I mean, maybe a rack's the answer to that, but I just would caution on the fallout of that. If people have to bring their kayaks down, you'll have a lot of issues on that side of the equation.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, so I think we've got, hi, Malone's are on. Okay.
Hello. So I've been listening, and I, to be totally frank, go ahead.
Name, address, please, Joe.
Joe Malone, 142 Jericho Road. And I've lived here for 60 years. And that area on Museum Beach was always, we were told as kids, that beach grass is pristine. You don't step on it, you respect it. It keeps the environment safe so that those precious dunes aren't swept away. If anybody took the time to go down there and look at what's occurred there, it's a disgrace. It's an absolute disgrace. People walk all over it. They leave their kayaks on it. They're killing all the beach grass. This was a commission that was supposed to look after the environment. You've totally just kind of let people run roughshod over it. I think you need to go down there and say, folks, you want to go kayaking, you bring your kayak to the beach, you kayak, whether it's on Museum Beach or whether it's over in another section of town, you take your kayak away, and then you come back another day. This has become like a junkyard. And if anybody cares enough to go look at it, in fact, if the state came and looked at it, they would say, what you've done here is absolutely let your responsibility of taking care of Scituate's precious environment go down the tubes. I hope you take this seriously. And it's not about, is 46 too many, is 98 too many, because I guarantee you there's a multiplier effect going on here. By next year, if you don't do anything about it, you will have 200 kayaks because people are on social media saying, go to Museum Beach, leave your kayak there. It's the best thing in the world. And they're not only from Scituate, they're from Pembroke, they're from Hanover, they're from Norwell. As a taxpayer in this state, I hope you will look after the interests of the people of Scituate so that this thing doesn't become such an eyesore that's even worse than it is now.
Thank you, Mr. Malone. And it is a concern for the commission. We've had numerous discussions. We were in the process of trying to do some nourishment there this spring, and then with the COVID situation. So it is on our radar screen. I've lost you. I think you've been muted.
May I be unmuted?
Yeah,
You
but
are
we're
now.
trying to keep it to 3 minutes. We've got a few other people.
10 seconds, because this is a solution. You put up a sign and say, if you don't take away your kayak within 7 days, you can find it at the transfer station. Period. That's not brain surgery. That's solution. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Here, we're gonna ask to unmute. Danielle, you're on.
Okay. Oh, hello. Hi.
Hi.
Hi. So I'm Danielle Wolf, 109 Jericho. We are brand new to town as far as living in the home. My grandparents lived here. I've been coming here since I was a little girl. Definitely Museum Beach has a lot more activity now than it did when I was a little kid, which I think is great. I love seeing all these families out there enjoying the beach with their small children. I will say, since we came in to occupy the home in May, the number of kayaks and canoes and rowboats has definitely multiplied. I think this weekend might have been a tipping point for myself and some of my neighbors when we went over there after 4th of July. There was a lot of firework debris. There's lots of boats left there. Somebody's actually got a unicorn anchored in the harbor now, which is super cute, but I feel like it's definitely starting to get abused, and some control definitely needs to be taken of the situation. I would also say, you know, we're going to be going to the selectmen meeting about the parking situation, because being in this corner location, we tend to be a spot where people are pulling up and pulling their kayaks out and sending their little kids across Jericho Road and unsupervised, it's dangerous. So I would probably support the idea of a rack so that maybe people aren't on my lawn necessarily getting their kayaks out and hauling them across the street. But whatever you guys can do to help us out. I know my neighbors who have been here a lot longer than me would really appreciate the support.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
Thanks for your input. On to the next one.
Wait, Tortolot is on?
Yep, can you hear us?
Yes.
Okay, hi. We live on Bay Ridge Road. Can you hear me okay?
Sure. Your name and address, please.
Diana and David Tortolot, 5 Bay Ridge Road.
Thank you.
We've been here for 19 years, and I'll just piggyback a lot of what Danielle just had to say about the increase of interest in this location and the beach. We have had, for many years, had to deal with the parking situation because nobody else wanted to pay any attention or grant us no parking signs on the beach. So we're hopefully going to get that resolved. But I just want to ask a question. You're planning on going to the selectman's office, the meeting next week. Are these kayaks going to get removed this season? They need to be removed this season.
We're in the process of going through the hearings and reviewing our options on what we can do there, ownership of the land. The commission has jurisdiction over the resource area. Apparently the town has jurisdiction over actually some of the pieces that gets put there. So there's a process to do this. We understand that it's an issue, and that's why we're going before the selectmen as well, with the hopes of coming up with a reasonable solution to get this sorted out. But we do understand that there's an issue, and that's why we're working at it.
I ask a quick question here too, Dave Tortolot, 5 Bay Ridge Road. I'm just wondering, I was looking at the outline. There's something called the WPA Act. I'm just wondering, are we, the town, is the town in violation allowing 70 kayaks on the seagrass?
I don't think they should be on the seagrass, and we're in the process of looking at that. So there is definitely issues with that being protected, and that's part of what we're working at. Okay, again, what our hope had been this spring was to do more fencing and do some additional planting, and unfortunately with the COVID situation and some other things, we weren't able to move on some of that this spring. So we understand people's frustration, and we're trying to work towards a resolution.
Thank you.
Who's somebody else on the line for this? Sure. Thank you.
Hi, this is Chris Murphy from Eagles Nest Road, and I was hoping I could speak to you quickly about this. One of my concerns is the Ammophila that's growing there, and we're talking, as the other gentleman said, the grass is being killed. I mean, we all know that the grass is the only thing that's holding that dune in place, and not only are these boats killing the grass, which is the only thing that's holding the substrate together, it's also allowing projectiles, specifically that set of stairs that have been there since January. I mean, the town is actually looking at a liability now if they leave that property there, and gosh forbid we get a storm and those materials go through somebody's property or somebody's home. I mean, I think that one of the things that's disappointing is the Conservation Commission is to be looking to protect our wetlands under the WPA that the gentleman spoke about. And my concern is that it's more of it's an eyesore or there's traffic. It really should be, why is anything being allowed to be stored in a wetland? I mean, you're well within the 50 feet of a wetland, never mind where high tide is. And we're not really caring about any of the folks or any of the conservation area that's there. We're not caring about stabilizing sand dunes. We're talking about renourishing. Why would you spend money on renourishing when folks don't understand that it's a critical habitat to begin with? We're not setting the precedent that We need vegetative growth. We need to keep Scituate what it is and not be a storage shed for folks. You can already see in some of those photos that were shown to us that there are bare spots where there's no vegetation. If these boats are allowed to continue to be placed on the grass, the entire area is going to be bare with nothing hold the dune in place. And as that wave and wind action hits the beach, we all know that sand or sediment is going to be moved along with the current and literally be destroying the small shoreline that's there to begin with. I mean, the effect on the environment is almost immediate, as continuously storing boats on the grass is going to substantially impact the immediate and surrounding area. Many of the South Shore towns, including Scituate, already say you can't store your boats here. Or if there's a wreck, it has to be removable, because we all know you can't store in a wetland. So, I mean, forget the unsightly and the traffic. Let's talk about why there's storage on town wetland to begin with. Why isn't anyone protecting the wetlands that we need to be doing? I mean, everybody on this phone that's on Conservation Commission is familiar with Ammophila. We know that's Latin for sand loving, and we know it's specifically planted there to hold the substrate together. But if we let people continue to crush it, there's a reason why the signs say it grows by the inch and dies by the foot. One person who steps on it is going to kill it. And then we're going to have much bigger issues. And I frankly don't want the town to have to be dealing with lawsuits because of projectiles and everything else. Just look to our neighbors to the south in Duxbury. They put news releases, social media, said, get your stuff out of there or we will take it. And that's exactly what they did. I mean, any person who violates the provisions of the Wetland Protection Act needs to be ordered to restore property to its original condition. And the storage of watercraft on sand dunes certainly leads to illegally altering the land. So all we have to do is follow the Wetlands Protection Act, which is why the Conservation Commission is there, and the problem is resolved. Put the notices up, give them 30 days, put a legal notice in the paper, and get them out of there. And then do an education on why nothing should be stored on grass.
Okay, thank you very much. Do we have anybody else?
It doesn't look like it.
Anybody else again? Do any of the members want to add anything to this? Okay, so we know that we have jurisdiction over this. We're going to be discussing this further with the selectmen next week. We definitely understand our role in protecting the marsh, and this is something that has sort of ballooned over the past year or two, and we know that we have to move to do this, and we appreciate the input from folks here this evening. And I think part of this is looking to maybe find alternate places for people that can launch their boats without having to move through the marsh. And I think along with looking to protect the marsh and move the boats out of here, we'll need to talk about additional places where people can access the harbor. I know that when the Maritime building was built over on Edward Foster, there was a kayak launch constructed with CPC funds at that location. We have other places in the harbor. Always looking for places for people to be able to park and access the harbor is a problem. So it's a little bit more than one issue. And I think discussing that with the selectmen and then maybe with some other agencies within the town, we can come up with something to start to alleviate this issue. So I'm sure you're going to hear more of this in the next upcoming weeks. And I think one of the big goals would be to have the unused boats out of there and limit the boats that can be stored and see what we can do with that. So we do appreciate that input and know that we'll be continuing to pursue a resolution here. What else do we have on the agenda for tonight?
I think that should do it, Frank.
Anybody else? Okay, I'll take a motion to close.
Motion to close meeting.
Do I have a second?
Second, Andy.
Okay. So all in favor, Rich?
Yes.
Penny?
She's muted again.
Yes.
Just, okay. Jen?
Yeah.
Doug?
Yes.
Andy?
Yes.
Brendan?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Good night.
Good night.
Right. Yes.